used to locusts. He's saying that this is something bigger, and this is something from God. God is sending this upon them. It is a punishment, and he is going to later on in the book. He's going to make them aware that if they do not repent, it will be even worse. It's going to get even worse. Of course, when the majority of the people at this time were farmers, and they owned farms and livestock. So when you destroy their farms, you've destroyed a nation. I mean, this is what they relied on, was their ability to grow crops. So he said, they're thinking, how could it possibly get any worse than this? Well, it can. When God's involved, don't underestimate His ability to bring you back into line and what He's able to do. So He's telling them all of these things, and he's continuing on. And we got through verse 4, talking about the four different creatures that he mentions here. People have said, well, these are the four different stages in a locust's life. We don't find any examples of this. These look like these are four different names, but they could be four different names for the same animal. You go to a lot of different parts of the country, and you'll find, we don't call it that. There's an old movie called Sling Blade. And one of the things the main character says, he says, some folks calls it a Kaiser blade, I calls it a sling blade. Or some people call it a sling blade, I call it a Kaiser blade. Well, what it is a big, almost like a scythe. It cuts down large swaths of grass. Well, he's saying, some people call it this, I call it this. So it could be that these were four different names for four different parts of the country, and they all called it the same thing, but they all ended up being the same thing. Okay? Or they end up calling it something different, but all end up being the same thing. Anyway, all right, so this is one of those things we can't read too much into. Don't sit there and try to define some deeper meaning to four different names for the same little creature that ends up killing it. Okay, all right, so, but he does say that these things, that comes in waves. I mean, it's just everything that is left behind after this one eats, and everything's left behind after this one. So it's a wave after wave after wave of these locusts. All right, so let's continue on. Verse 5, awake ye drunkards and weep, and wail all ye drinkers of wine because of the sweet wine, for it is cut off from your mouth. All right, so Joel, and rightfully so, views this locust plague, this plague of insects, as a manifestation of God's displeasure of His people. He's displeased by His people because of their sins. And He directs His first admonition. Now look who He directs it to. Awake to who? The drunks. Okay? So he said, no matter what your view is of social drinking, the Bible very specifically says that to be drunk is a sin. We don't find this as anything else. If you are a drunkard, you are in sin. So he directs this first admonition to this class of sinners. So why is he telling them, awake ye drunkards, and weep and wail because of the sweet wine, for it is cut off from your mouth? Okay? Have you ever seen somebody that whines so much as a drunk that can't get alcohol? Oh man, they behave. Go to it. I'm not saying do this, but I'm saying if you ever want to see somebody, go to a bar and watch somebody get cut off. You've had too much. You can't get any more. Well, I'm not drunk, and they stagger around. I haven't had too much to drink. And they weep and they whine and they wail and they bemoan the fact that the bartender was smart enough to cut them off because they've had too much to drink. Which basically, this is what people do when they are drunks. They drink a lot, and now they can't get it anymore. This is what they're going to do. They can't get it because the locusts have destroyed the crop. There's not going to be any wine. There's not going to be any more sweet wine. Now, sweet wine was something that was they would manufacture it, they would distill it, and then they would drink it fairly new. And this was the idea of sweet wine. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go to their old stores, and that wine was not near as good. That was more kept in stores. It was more like vinegar. So not good to drink. I know people who have drunk vinegar. Not a good tasting thing. Yes, ma'am. Right. No, it's not. But no, somebody else didn't. Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That sweet wine is the kind that most people would think about. You would drink it while you were eating a meal or something like that. The old stuff was not the best tasting. The best tasting. Okay, so here's his first admonition. He's telling him this: he said, "Weep and wail, because your supply is being cut off. You're not going to have anything more." But this is an admonition. He's talking about the drunks. This is and God is punishing them, is He not? Wouldn't you say? Yeah, He's punishing them. He's going to cut off their supply. All right, verse 6. For a nation is come up upon my land, strong and without number. His teeth are the teeth of a lion, and he hath the jaw teeth of a lioness. Now, a lot of people, this expression has been made is the basis for a lot of people's misinterpretation of this scripture. A lot of people, when they look at this, a nation has come upon my land, they're of course thinking about a foreign country that has come upon the nation and is attempting to overthrow it and subjugate it. But of course, we understand that we're talking about a literal plague. We're not talking about there. This is not figurative. This is not symbolic of another country. This is a literal plague. So really, what he's doing, he's giving personification to these insects. And I'm trying to remember. There's a word for it, and I can't. I'll remember it after this is all said and done. But basically, he's giving human characteristics to an animal. Okay, this plague of locusts. He's describing it as if it's an invading army, because isn't it? Very much so. When you read about what these locusts were doing, this is what an invading army would do. They would come in and lay waste. Okay, they would take everything, anything that was of use or of value. They would destroy the rest, and they would carry the rest of it away. Well, that's what these locusts are doing. They're destroying the crops, but they're doing it. Of course, they're fattening themselves up. They're taking all the good out of the crops and leaving what? Stems, twigs, what's left behind. And some of these would eat the leaves, some of these would eat the bark off the outside, some of these would eat the inside portion of the plant. So when they came through, it was like a battlefield. After they were gone, there was nothing above ground really. They would eat it down to the very roots. You'd find these little depressions in the ground. You'd find what was left was the root system. So it was very much like an invading army, not leaving anything. Now we see this mirrored in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, because Jesus even says that there would not be two stones left on top of one another. So I'm not saying that this is what it's talking about here, but this is certainly a type, isn't it? When the people would come in and destroy the nation, this is what they were going to do. They weren't going to leave anything left. Okay, so but he's not here describing an invading army of human beings, another nation. He's just making a point about these locusts certainly would resemble an invading army. Okay, so continuing on, it's like a metaphorical description, let's put it that way. All right, verse 7, he hath laid my vine waste. All right, well, we see that up in verse 5, right? That's where the grapes come from. All right, so he's laid the vine waste. There's nothing left on the vine. He hath barked my fig tree and made it clean bare. Remember? He ate the leaves first, and then he takes off all the bark. So I think we're probably talking about maybe 4 different types of creatures that all accomplish the same thing. Some of the locusts eat the leaves, and then you've got the worms that come around and they eat the bark. You think about, you wonder about the people's mentality, the thinking during this time. Here they are, they see this happening. Of course, they're used to it, but then it seems a little different this time. These locusts are coming in, but it's not coming in and going away quickly like they're used to. They're coming in, and then after, you imagine sitting there thinking, okay, well, we can at least salvage a portion of this. And then after this swarm of locusts leaves and they're all full and they're heavy from eating all of this, basically stripping everything, then all of a sudden there's yet another wave of destruction. And these come in and they eat all of the bark off of the outside of the trees that's edible. Then all of a sudden, they think, okay, maybe we can still salvage a portion of what we've got. And then after these worms leave, then you've got yet another that comes in and actually eats the inside of the tree. And can you imagine the thought process going through their minds? They're beside themselves. They don't know what to do. At this point, there's nothing they can do to salvage anything. They can't. Well, maybe we can get another crop in. No, there's no way. You can't get another crop in because more damage is going to happen because of the destruction of these insects. There's going to be damage that's going to be coming down the road that's going to make it even harder for them to bounce back from all of these things. And all of this goes back to, remember in Leviticus, when our study of Leviticus, remember what God said he would do if the people remained faithful. He told them in no uncertain terms, if you remember, very specifically, he told them, if you will obey me and keep my commandments, I'm going to keep these things from happening to you. The locusts, all of these forces of nature are not going to touch you because I'm going to basically build a hedge around you like he did Job. Okay, that's what Satan said. You built a hedge around him. Nothing can touch him. Well, that idea is the same thing that God did to Israel, and then the divided kingdom. He even protected the divided kingdom if the people would remain faithful to him. He said, I'll still protect you even though I didn't want this divided kingdom. I knew it was going to happen, but I'll protect you if you stay faithful to me. The locusts, the wild animals, the invading armies, all of these things will not be able to touch you if you remain faithful. Well, we know then, if this is true, what he said was true, and we know it is because God said it. If this is happening to the people, what can we discern from that? They weren't being faithful. If these things were happening to them, it was because they were not being faithful. Because he said, if you are faithful, these things will not happen to you. Okay, that's logic. Logic 101. So now we understand the problems that they're having are not because God doesn't love them. It's not because there's nothing that God can do about the forces of nature. He stands back and just lets things happen. No. These things are happening to them because they are unfaithful. And you can see if this kind of bad thing is what's happening to him, the people must have really, really turned their back on him. They've gone a completely different direction. Okay, so it says, I'm sorry, got on a tangent there. He said, he hath laid my vine waste, he hath barked my fig tree, he hath made it clean bare. So you've seen those trees where the bark strips off and it's just this bright white, shiny, because the bark's gone. All right. Well, when the bark has gone off of a tree, what happens to the tree? The bark is an essential thing to keep other things from getting to it. So once that bark's gone, that protective bark, something else can get in there and do that. Okay. So he hath made it clean bare; he hath cast it away. The branches thereof are made white. All right. Let's see, verse 8. Lament. Lament. What's lament? Weep, mourn. Basically, you need to bemoan, be sorrowful, lament like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the husband of her youth. Now, this idea, just doing a little bit deeper research, this refers to the mourning of a virgin espoused to her husband, whose life ended before the consummation of the marriage. So this is not a wedded couple that has been married for some time and have had children and things happen and she's lost. This is a woman who has lost her husband before they are even able to consummate the marriage and that potential for children. Just reading a little bit about the Hebrew traditions, it said this kind of grief was considered to be particularly anguished by the Hebrews. And there's this idea that there was so much promise in this marriage, and now that will never be realized because of the death of the spouse. Okay, so yes, ma'am. Right. She's espoused. Promised to. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. She's engaged, much like betrothed, like Mary was to Joseph. Okay. They were not actually married. They were not married. That marriage had not been. That the wedding. That wedding had not taken place, and they were not wedded, but they were espoused to one another. And it doesn't matter when, because you know that consummation takes place fairly soon after the marriage. So this is a woman who has never. I mean, you think about that promise of that marriage and how exciting that is, and how exciting a time it is for everybody in the family, for her family, for him or his family, for the two of them, and that marriage is never consummated. They don't enjoy that union. And this is you can imagine what that young woman, the anguish that young woman must be feeling. Okay, but it also goes in to show, it's a reminder, somewhat, that the nation of Israel is what? They were frequently compared to a virgin that was promised to a man. Okay, Israel was the betrothed of God, so to speak. I mean, not literally, but figuratively. They were promised. They were to keep themselves pure. And they were promised to someone, God. Okay? So there's a little bit of figurative language here, but it kind of gives us a very real indication about how God felt about his people. He loved them. You know, we think, people, I get into discussions with people all the time, and they talk about how angry God is and how evil God is and how God hates, how can you serve a God that would do something like this? And I'm thinking, hold on, God is the aggrieved party here. Okay? God's the one that's been betrayed. God's the one that, it said that the nation of Israel and Judah, they went whoring after false gods. Well, who does the sin fall upon? Does it fall upon God? No. It falls on the people. So why would I feel bad because God's doing something that is within his right to do so, to punish those who are in opposition to him? So when people say stuff, they say, you don't understand Scripture. You don't understand the Bible. You look at it from a human standpoint. Well, that's an awful thing to do. Well, he's the one that sets the rules. When they disobey them, they're the ones that pay the price, not God. All right. Verse 9, the meal offering and the drink offering are cut off from the house of Jehovah. The priest, Jehovah's ministers, mourn. Why are the meal offering and the drink offering cut off? What were the people supposed to bring? The first fruits of their crops. They were to bring the wave offering and the heave offering. They were to bring I love how this goes into Leviticus. It talks about all the things that they were to bring: the barley and the corn and the wheat and the meal and all of these things. They were to pour out olive oil. Well, you can't have olive oil if there's no olives. You can't have wine if there's no grapes or vineyards, whatever they're making wine out of. They can't bring this to Jehovah. They can't bring their offerings. When there's no crops, there's nothing there. And they were told to bring the first fruits. So if there's no first fruits, guess what? There's nothing going into the storehouses. This brings us to the second point of that. The meal offering and the drink offering are cut off from the house of Jehovah. Where's the house of Jehovah? The temple. That's where the people brought their offerings. They would come to the temple, the priest would come out, and they would give this, and it was a very symbolic thing. They would come and they would bring these baskets of good, and they would give them to the priest. The priest would give them a blessing. He would take these things in. He would put them in the storehouse. Why were they put in the storehouse? That's right. The priest had no crops. They didn't grow all of these things. They relied on the people to bring these offerings. Well, when the offerings ceased to come, what happened to the priests? They go hungry. I mean, they went out begging. They went out, there's nothing in the storehouse. There's nothing for us to eat. So they would go out and they would sit there, and that was such a slap in the face to the priests of God. They're having to go out and basically beg from the people the things that should have been coming to them, and rightfully so. That was the way God set it up. The priests lived off of those things that were brought in as offerings. Part of it was given to God, and then the priests were to eat the rest of it. So here they are. There's nothing in there for them. Now, we have to remember this also, that while the people were engaging in sin, many times the priests were also engaging in sin. So this was not only an indirect, but it was also a direct punishment for the things that were going on. Many times the people, the point of the priesthood was to guide the people. If the people were going off into sin, many times it was because the priests were not engaging them. They were not instructing them correctly. Many times the priests were taking their direct cues from those who were in charge, the king, the ruling class. And when they would put a great deal of pressure on the priests, listen, this is what I want to do, and you need to fall into line. And unfortunately, the priests, instead of remaining faithful themselves, didn't. Okay? So this was both an indirect and a direct punishment to the priests for the sin of the nation. All right? Verse 10. Excuse me. Verse 10. The field is laid waste. The land mourneth. That's an interesting turn of phrase. The land mourneth. Not the nation mourneth. The land mourneth. So what is that? What is he talking about here? The idea of the land mourneth. Yep. Okay. Yep. The land's not producing anything, and it degraded the land. I mean, the land is it wasn't just the plants that were dying. The land itself was having issues. It was all of this stuff was it was an accumulative effect. The idea, if you remember, once again getting into Leviticus, remember what the people were supposed to do every 7 years. What were they supposed to do? It was a fallow land. It was supposed to be a Sabbath for the land. And remember what it said when the people were not engaging in that. And we didn't read about it. This was not in Leviticus, but we read about it in Leviticus when we were studying that. There was a verse that God was punishing the people for not observing that. And it said that the land crieth out because it has not had its Sabbaths. So once again, he's getting that personification. He's using that allegory. But it very much speaks to this. The land crieth out, the land mourneth. Why? Because the field is laid waste. There's nothing growing. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. The land was not being taken care of. For one reason, it wasn't able to be taken care of. It's certainly not healthy. I mean, you can if you absolutely have to, but I wouldn't want to. I mean, for one thing, you've got flying insects with everything that they bring, and breathing all of that in, and it's certainly not a good idea. No. And there's no. I mean, the technology to do anything was not there. You couldn't protect anything. There's no pesticides. There's nothing that you could spray. There's nothing really that you can do. They would, a lot of times they would set fires and they would direct smoke if they possibly could to do something like that. But you're talking about something that would have been almost impossible to do. Like I said, did anybody go home and look at the YouTube videos about locust swarming? I gave you guys a perfect opportunity to go home and look at these YouTube videos. Go home and watch the YouTube videos of locusts swarming overseas. Like I said, we don't have it as much here, but they still have to deal with these every so often. But there's some where people are out in the very middle of it, and it's like a whirlwind. It's almost like a tornado. There's so much noise and there's so much wind. It's absolutely astounding as to what happens in something like that. It would have made doing almost anything at that particular point in time almost impossible to do anything outside. You're stuck indoors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're bad news, and they still destroy. I don't know how many millions of dollars of crops a year in other parts of the world. It still happens. Yeah, it's bad thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. drove them away. Yeah. So bad things. Bad stuff going on. All right, continuing on. Got back up. All right, the field is laid waste, the land mourneth, for the grain is destroyed. So here he lists the problems. The grain is destroyed, the new wine is dried up, the oil languisheth. Be confounded, O ye husbandmen. Wail, O ye vine dressers, for the wheat and for the barley, for the harvest of the field is perished. The vine is withered, the fig tree languisheth, the pomegranate tree, the palm tree also, and the apple tree. Even all the trees of the field are withered, for joy is withered away from the sons of men. So he's just describing the devastation. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. This is what people are having to deal with. You know, and there are the innocent, the faithful being punished with the wicked. Yeah, he didn't spare one family because they were close to him. The entire nation is being punished. Part of that is the idea that many times peer pressure is a good thing. You know, the good folks are putting pressure on those who are in opposition to God. You know, we need to get back. We need to come back to God. We need to get faithful again. So he's just describing all of these things, this horrible destruction, this horrible devastation that's going on. And, you know, it's you know, and the people are listening to this. People are hearing these things coming from Joel. Verse 13, gird yourselves with sackcloth, and lament ye priests. Wail, ye ministers of the altar. Come, lie all night in sackcloth, ye ministers of my God. For the meal offering and the drink offering are withholden from the house of your God. Once again, he's getting to, speaking back to the point that there's nothing being given to God. Okay? The temple there's no one lined up at the temple to give of those first fruits. None of the offerings are being given. Does it mean the people had nothing? No, it means that they had to provide for themselves. And they were providing for themselves before they were taking food for the priest at the temple. All right? No, it makes it, you know, that's very much human nature. You know, speaking as a parent, if things came down to it, what would you do to take care of your family? Do whatever it took. You would do whatever it took to feed your family. You know, and to a certain point, there's certain things that I will not do, just because I couldn't face my family if I did them. But if it were within your power to do so, would you do it to feed your family? Yes, absolutely. When you have a child or two children, or I mean, in this case, and back in these days, multiple members of your family. I mean, these were large families that all lived together, and of course, what do? Well, we have food in store. We have enough to subside on, but we can't. There's nothing extra. There's nothing more. Okay, so yeah, you would do what it took to provide for yourself and your own. Absolutely. But here, I love, look in the second part of verse 13. I found this very interesting. Sanctify a fast. Sanctify a fast. He's talking to the ministers, right? He's telling them, okay, you need to hold a fast. Well, guess what they're doing? It's an unintentional fast. It's not something that they desire to do, but they're fasting anyway, okay? I think at this point it's called starving. It's not really a fast. But here he's saying sanctify a fast, which means call one. Set it apart. It's a holy fast. It's not, well, we don't have any food to eat. We're not going to eat. We're going to sanctify one. It's going to be a holy fast. It's going to be an offering to God. Our fast is going to be an offering to God. Call a solemn assembly. Gather the old men and all the inhabitants of the land unto the house of Jehovah your God, and cry unto Jehovah. So here he's giving them remedy, right? He said, this is what's happening to you. This is the remedy for this. So who's the call go out to? It calls out to the men of the altar, the priests, those who were truly in charge of the nation's spiritual welfare. He said, this is what you need to do. Okay? You need to, one, proclaim a fast. Now, proclaim a fast means you don't eat even if you've got food in the house. Okay? You don't eat. It is a holy fast. It's one that is sanctified. Then what do? You call an assembly. This was not something that was very frequently done. There were only 4 big assemblies of the year where everybody would come to the temple. Okay, so this was not something that was common. So this kind of shows that this is serious business. We need all of the representatives from the families and the tribes. We need them to come to the temple of the Lord. This is what you need to do. Gather the old men and all the inhabitants of the land, and you need to come to the temple, and this is what we're going to do when we get to the temple. We are going to cry unto Jehovah. Now, it doesn't mean sit there and wail about how unfair this is and how he's punishing us for something that we didn't do, and basically talk about how bad things are for us. What is he wanting them to do, essentially? Repent, cry unto Jehovah. What they should have been doing in the first place. This is what they should have been doing anyway. So he's basically telling them what they need to do. They knew this, but he's saying, look, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. And if you don't do, and he's going to tell them in a couple minutes, if you don't do this, it's going to get even worse for you. So you need to get on this. All right? So it's an appeal right here for the priests of God's religion, for the priests of Israel, to get themselves up and to stir themselves up into action. Because you know what? The priests were probably just as likely to sit back and cry about what was going on and, well, we don't know what to do, and we've done all of these things, and they were probably offering up prayers to God, but the problem was their prayers weren't being heard. Their prayers weren't being heard because their hearts were still far away from Him. So it's like somebody saying, well, I need God to do this in my life. Well, you can ask Him all you want, but if you're not in a right relationship with Him, is He going to hear that prayer? What's the first prayer He wants to hear? Repentance. I want to repent. I want to come back to you. I want to make myself right. Then I can come before you and ask for something. I can't just expect you. You're not a cosmic vending machine where I get up and I put my quarter in, I pull the lever and something comes out. That's not the way it works. And this is what the people, unfortunately, were engaging in. This is their behavior. All right, so he's telling them, this is what you have to do. You've got to get the nation up. You've got to rouse them up. You think about the great speeches made by man over years. You know, we can read them we can read about them. Sometimes we've heard them in person, or we've heard them on the radio and TV. We've read them before. You know, there are some great ones. I mean, there are some that you just, wow, that was one. But all of them have share a common thing. They rouse us to action. They make us desire something better for ourselves, don't they? Okay, going back to even as far as this speech Julius was given by Brutus after Julius Caesar was assassinated, and he makes this speech, and you're like, it roused the people to action. They said, this was wrong. This man shouldn't have been killed the way he was, and it stirred the people up. Then you've got come forward. I don't know how Churchill's speech to the British, during World War II. We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the streets. We will fight them. And I mean, the people were really discouraged. I mean, they'd had loss after loss after loss. They were surrounded. They didn't have a lot, and he roused them to action. They said, that was the turning point for me, people. That was the morale turning point. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, Martin Luther King's speech in the National Mall. You hear these speeches, and it's like, man, we got to do something. Well, here's what he's saying. The priests are responsible for rousing the people to action. This is what you need to do. Don't sit back and cry about this thing. There's a way that you can get out of this. There's a remedy for this. And the question is, what are you going to do? We look at ourselves sometimes, do we not? We think about how bad things are, and he's saying, you can sit there and do this all day long, but I've given you what you need to do to change things and turn things around. What are you waiting on? So, all right, continuing on. Let's go ahead and get in verse 15, and then we'll finish up here in just a minute. Alas for the day of Jehovah is at hand. Now, what does it mean there? A lot of people think, well, the day of Jehovah is the second coming. It's the final destruction of the world. No. What is the day of Jehovah? Well, all days are Jehovah's days, right? This is the day that the Lord hath made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. All days belong to God. But what does he say? When he says the day of Jehovah, it means what? Yeah, he's going to put himself out there. The destruction is coming. We know then that the destruction that's happening here is not some freak of nature. It's God manifesting his power to his people. I will show you how powerful I am. And if you think this is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. So the day of Jehovah is at hand, and his destruction from the Almighty shall it come. All right. So here he's saying Joel's going even beyond. He's prophesying that the day of Jehovah is at hand. There's two different meanings. One, of course, the idea the final destruction of the entire nation of the world, the peoples of the world, and then, of course, it means the time of severe visitation inflicted upon the nations by the judgment of God. There's a lot of this I don't want to go into. Verse 16, is not the food cut off from before our eyes? Yea, joy and gladness from the house of God. The seeds rot under their clods. The garners are laid desolate. The barns are broken down, for the grain is withered. How do the beasts groan? The herds of cattle are perplexed, because they have no pasture. Yea, the flocks of sheep are made desolate. So he's just once again talking about the destruction. This is the secondary destruction, right? We have all of the first destruction. Plants, all the vegetation is gone, but here's some other things that are going on. The seeds are rotting. Why? There's nothing giving nourishment to them, and they're not able to give nourishment to anything. So the seeds are rotting. So this is a problem, right? This is a serious issue. Not only the plant's gone, but the seeds, anything that was planted for the next rotation of crops, that's gone. That's not coming up. All right. What else? Yeah, the animals are suffering. When cattle can't graze, what happens? Yeah. Right. That's right. It's flat as a board. There's nothing poking up that even the sheep can get a hold of. Cattle, if they can't, if cattle can't graze, if you've got stuff in the barn for them, you can do something. But what does it say? The barns are broken down, for the grain is withered. So not only is there nothing for the cows to graze on, the barns are broken down because there's nothing in there. Anything that was in there is gone. It's already been used. Okay. So, and last, verse 19. O Jehovah, to thee do I cry, for the fire hath devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and the flame hath burned all the trees of the field. Yea, the beasts of the field pant unto thee, for the water brooks are dried up, and the fire hath devoured the pastures of the wilderness. All right, now, I want to make sure we don't see anything here where this is a metaphorical reference to the locusts. This is the idea of actual fire destroying things. And just a little bit of research, the danger of fire increases in direct proportion to the dryness of the vegetation in the atmosphere. And the extended, of course, with what we already got, the devastation of the crops and the drought, what's going to happen with fire? Things can burst into flame with almost no action taken. A stray burst of lightning can spark a fire, and it'll just completely set things loose. And now we've got no water to put anything out with, so it burns unchecked. You think about the idea of crops are planted to keep water in place, and when those crops are gone, guess where the water goes? They're not able to collect it the way that they were wanting to collect it. So this is just a nonstop devastation of the people. And he wants to make sure, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, it would, and it would be easy to set a fire. They've instituted a burn ban again, and I was talking about that last night. I had no idea that we had a burn ban going on in Paulding and Cobb. Well, it's for good reason. I completely understand it, because it can be devastating. But this is what's going on. I mean, you think how bad it is here? Yeah, it's bad. But these people, this is just beyond the pale, and it's something that but it's something that they brought upon themselves. They weren't the innocent party. And all of a sudden things like this happen. This is happening to them because God is aggrieved by their unfaithfulness. Yep. Yeah. In more than one way. God has used locusts throughout the history to punish, and this is certainly a case of that. Okay. Thank you very much.